Wisconsin is going back to work.
I'm Steve Walters.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
This is Rewind, Wisconsinized summary of this week in the Capitol. J.R., between April 2nd and May 14th, 3 body blows to Wisconsin campaign finance law issued by federal judges. Now let's talk about the most recent one, 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. Do you consider that one the most telling and the most important body blow?
Well, in some ways yes, some ways no. On the no part, a lot of these rules that they found unconstitutional hadn't been enforced anyway because the Government Accountability Board had realized in a separate lawsuit that they were not going to work. So they weren't doing them anyway.
Right.
But the message in that ruling was you need to rewrite campaign finance law in Wisconsin. From Judge Sykes, former Supreme Court justice here in Wisconsin, pointed out that in all these federal court decisions over the last couple of years, Wisconsin lawmakers have not kept pace with them. Instead, it's been the GAB trying to implement rules to keep pace. Well, that hasn't worked. So she's saying rewrite the law, and that's, I think, the message from that decision. More than anything else is it's time for an update. If you
Well, you saw the update or the summary of this from Mike Wittenweiler, and he said, well, I just want to make 2 points, reading from his newsletter. Wisconsin's ban on corporate political spending is unconstitutional.
Which we kind of
and the GAB cannot issue ads during the 30 and 60 days, but prior to elections.
Which they weren't doing anyway. Another interesting part of that decision was, remember now, if you are an individual, then you want to go put an ad in your local paper and spend $300.01 to say that Joe Blow stinks, kind of thing. You have to register as a PAC, report as a PAC to the GAB. The court said you can't do that.
Yeah,
it's too complicated.
Right.
You need a new standard so that the average person doesn't need a lawyer to go out and participate in the political process. So that's an interesting development as well in that case.
Well, going back to what you said, I want to quote just one sentence from the ruling written by former Supreme Court Justice Diane Sykes. Like other campaign finance systems, Wisconsin's is labyrinthine and difficult to decipher without a background in this area of the law. In certain critical respects, it violates the constitutional limits on the government's power to regulate independent political speech. I chose that because I just wanted to work in the word labyrinthine, well, whatever.
You know you're in trouble reading a court decision when it tells you this is going to be complicated.
Yes, yes. But you're right. Repeatedly, the court said, Wisconsin, you've not kept pace. Your laws are outdated. Your rules are outdated. Time for and that led Speaker Vos to say, he's going to lead an effort. So we have got a new campaign. We have got a new issue for the next session, don't we?
Well, what's interesting with that is Republicans, and again, big if they hold both houses in the governor's office this fall, they're the ones who are not lawmakers, Republican lawmakers who read the law. What are they going to do? I mean, they lean toward, they're all happy with these decisions, by the way. They're going to lean toward less regulation. The Democrats, typically speaking, have argued for more and trying to get right up to the limit that you can do. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Plus, too, Mike Ellis has been the biggest Republican campaign finance reform advocate in the legislature in the last 15 years.
Yes.
He's gone after this fall, retiring. So that voice is gone from the Republican side. So yeah, you're talking about probably a new set of rules. If you can kind of project forward how they've been so far, that would be less regulatory than we've
Can you see
to.
Vos and his fellow Republicans listening to the Dems on any of these campaign finance issues, JR?
They did work together on a few bills this session. Now, it got out of the assembly, that one that had a number of provisions that both sides liked, if you remember that.
Right.
Then it went in the Senate, they didn't like it, a little too much. So there is that possibility there. Plus, too, if you go too far, there's always a chance of going to court. So they'll have to balance that. But the leading voice will be Republican for sure in that.
And then the second decision, May 6, Federal Judge Randa said, well, I'll read one sentence from his ruling. Issue advocacy is not subject to campaign finance limitations because it is viewed only one way, and that is protected First Amendment speech. How big a deal was that ruling?
To be determined, because Randa issued his ruling on one day. The Seventh Circuit came in right away and said, put it on hold.
Within 12
Randa
hours.
came back the next day and said, okay, I fixed this problem. Now we're back on. And now we're back to Seventh Circuit again with another appeal. What's interesting there is I talked to several attorneys and got varying opinions about how far his opinion goes. If you take it to the extreme, one attorney argued to me that basically, if you're a campaign now, you can coordinate with an issue ad group. Only issue ads, not express, not the magic words of elect, vote for, vote against,
defeat.
but the issue ads. Like I'm Joe Blow and I want to talk about taxes, I can go to a group and say, hey, let's talk about lowering taxes in these markets, kind of thing. That's one extreme. The other kind of opinion was, don't go so far just yet. There's still appeals to be done. And the message I got from operatives was, nobody wants to be the test case. Nobody wants to push the envelope in October of this year and find out in December you were wrong. Right. Then you're back in court and you're the one who's possibly facing charges. So wait and see what happens to the appeals process on that. And then again, the lawmakers may address that in this rewrite of the law.
That's true.
Next session.
And then April 2nd, the U.S. Supreme Court in the McCutcheon decision that blew away our $10,000 limit on what people can give all campaigns.
Yeah, and so here, the GAB reached an agreement. We're not going to enforce it, even though they haven't challenged it in Wisconsin court yet. But if you add all three things together, the attorney for Right to Life in that one case said, look, there's a Titanic-sized hole in Wisconsin campaign finance laws.
What's left for GAB to enforce? We got an election in 5+ months.
Candidates still have campaign finance, limits on how much they can take for contributions. So you still have the express advocacy and you still have the candidate stuff. I mean, you still have, if you're doing express advocacy, from what I understand, you still have those reporting requirements of like, we're doing this, we're spending money on this, voting for and against. That's still there. But issue ads, that's a whole different ballgame.
Wow, that's okay. But in other news, this week the Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance released what I thought was a major good study saying as baby boomers age and retire, the workforce, the number of people in the workforce population is just going to be decimated. For example, in 11 counties in northern Wisconsin, they're going to see a 20% drop in the number of working age population. Todd Berry said this, it's difficult to create jobs when there are no people to fill them, and hardest hit will be Price County, 41% drop in working age population, Bayfield County, 35%. I found that intriguing. Any comment on that?
Just that we've seen this kind of coming for a while, the aging of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's also a national issue with the baby boomers, this big giant bubble, and now there's not many people to replace them. So, add that into the problem we've heard about repeatedly in Wisconsin of we have jobs but don't have people skilled to fill them, and that's an issue as well. So you don't have skilled people, don't have enough people. That's an issue to deal with.
But the Taxpayers Alliance projection went through 2040, and I'm thinking about in 2040, the number of the older people in northern Wisconsin need health care and transportation systems. Huge problems, huge issues. But
I'll be one of them in 30 years.
Well, I don't want to go there right now, JR. New subject, new numbers from the Department of Workforce Development. 28,000 private sector jobs created last year. About 100,000, let's say that, created in the first 3 years of the Walker administration. How big a problem are these numbers?
Well, the Walker campaign's been trying to muddle this issue for a long time now. I mean, we've known for a while he's not going to hit 250,000 jobs in his first 4 years. So that message from the promise will be stamped on everybody's forehead of 250,000 to now it's we're better off now than we were 4 years ago. That's the Walker message these days.
Yep.
He wants to create the impression for people of don't pay attention to the number itself. Look at where we are compared to where we were. Democrats, however, not going to let them get away with that. They're going to pound that number repeatedly until November that this guy's failed. Where are the jobs? You keep seeing from them things like we're 9th out of 10 states in the Midwest for job growth. Our job growth rate is 30 whatever, depending what month it is and all that kind of stuff. So to them, this is a failure. Where are the jobs? And that's going to hear for now until November. Where are the jobs? One
other subject, at our last show, we previewed the state GOP convention. What do you remember from it? The delegates endorsed a young African-American man, Julian Bradley, from La Crosse, for Secretary of State, correct?
Yes.
That surprise you?
No, Julian's an activist, kind of plugged into that crowd. It's a big jump, though, from getting a crowd of, 1,000 people to endorse you at a weekend convention to beating Doug LaFollette, and more importantly, the LaFollette name, statewide in a race come November where you are not going to be the main feature on that ballot. So that'll be a tough challenge still for him to win that race.
And there was no vote to, again, stress the ability of states like Wisconsin to secede from the union?
Yeah.
Despite some of the more conservative type.
All the attention going to the convention was about succession and Obamacare, nullification, these kind of buzzwords in certain circles. Republican operatives and kind of party establishment people were basically looking at it as grit your teeth and bear it, put your head down, because come Monday morning, nobody's going to care anymore. It'll all go away. Governor Walker some people marked to me that his speech was an acknowledgement of let's get past this stuff and focus on the real issue. He kept saying it's not about this other stuff, it's about jobs, the economy, our success story. They realized that the message got away from them going to convention. They're trying to get away from that.
And I'm confused. There were attempts, no confidence motions on Senator Olson, Representative Castell. Pass or fail?
That failed. The language got tweaked or they tried to tweak it in various different ways, but in the end, one delegate on the floor said, we've sent a message about Common Core by even bringing this up. Let's not bring the attention of doing this thing about lawmakers in this way. And that's still an issue for the party. I mean, they are very much engaged on doing with Common Core, but Castell, and talked to him after the convention, said, look, I've looked at this issue quite closely. If you set the things you have to know by the time you graduate from high school and go work back to kindergarten and have these benchmarks, no matter what standards you set, they will look like Common Core. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch later.
Good. Thanks for the update. I had to leave the convention prior to its end. I know you stayed. Okay, time for the WisPolitics stock report.
Rising Wisconsin Right to Life. I mean, they have not been afraid to challenge Wisconsin campaign laws or other laws in court. They win again. A big win for them that they've gone through. And go back and look at McCain-Feingold, for example, 10 years ago. They won one about issue ads for an election. So
good memory.
They have done this before, and they'll probably do it again if they try to regulate what they want to do.
Okay. And mixed?
Scott Walker. The appeal in the Doe case, if you look at the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals briefing schedule, it goes out to late July. That means nothing's going to happen before this election, so that's kind of off the table a little bit. Mm-hmm. But you have the possibility of another document dump coming out there because prosecutors and Eric O'Keefe, Club for Growth, have said, yeah, release these documents you've collected in this
And news
lawsuit.
Organizations have filed to have those released.
What's in there? Could it be embarrassing? The unemployment rate is down to 5.8%, the best since October of 2008, but the job numbers aren't that great. I mean, you had this kind of muddling along, if you will. Then look at Mary Burke, where nobody's on the air right now, which is kind of surprising to some people, but also makes a little bit of sense. It still is May, but every day that Burke's not on the air moving the needle, she's not getting herself known to people in a positive way. So it's kind of hit this lull, if you will, the campaign for governor.
Okay, and falling.
Scott Krug, he's in a targeted district as it is.
He's out of Rapids. He represents Rapids, finishing his second term.
Took out Marlon Schneider 4 years ago, promising, I'll never take a cent of per diem, and I'll serve 2 terms. Well, last year he took more than $10,000 in per diems, and he's running for a 3rd term. So that is an issue for him. It's not just that he broke a promise, but it's a bad incumbent year in some ways. People, like, you look at polls, it's a good Republican-looking year, but they also don't like anybody at this point. The issue for Democrats is this. The candidate they have, they're not real thrilled with right now in that district. You have to find somebody good because you have to have a credible candidate, you have to have a good operation, raise some money, and run a good race. Because even though Krug has these promise issues, he also played a role in Skyward and retaining that in the Stevens Point area. Yes. So it's not a done deal. This guy is cooked.
But those are 2 campaign promises. I'm not going to take per diems, and I'm not going to serve more than 2 terms that voters can understand.
Yes. And there'll be more to come.
Beware of simple issues.
Because Krug had ties to some of these questionnaires from Tea Party groups in the 2012 race. They didn't really come out until afterward about things like, arresting officials trying to implement Obamacare, stuff like that, a little bit fringish. I'm sure there'll be more stuff come out with Scott Krug before November is here.
That's going to be one race to watch. I think that's Rewind for May 16th. I'm Steve Walters.
And I'm J.R. Ross.